Long before written history began, long before cities, and long before monuments rose from stone, humans were already learning how to survive in landscapes that offered very little mercy. Archaeological evidence now shows that these early populations did not move forward along a single, straight path. There was no simple progression, no clear line leading neatly from primitive to modern. Instead, human adaptation unfolded slowly, unevenly, and differently from place to place. Climate shifted, landscapes changed, and groups of people responded in their own ways to the challenges around them. One discovery, known today as the Naslet Kotter skeleton, offers a rare window into this deep and complex past. The remains were preserved with remarkable clarity, protected by the desert environment for thousands of years. When researchers examined the skeleton, they noticed something unusual. The features did not fit neatly into a single category. Some traits appeared distinctly modern, others reflected much older ancestry. Genetic evidence and fossil records from across Africa now support what this skeleton suggests. Human populations during this period were not uniform. They were diverse. Different groups carried different combinations of physical traits. These differences were shaped by deep local histories and occasional contact with neighboring populations. Rather than a single evolutionary ladder, human development resembled a mosaic. Populations overlapped, they interacted, they mixed, and sometimes they diverged again. The Naslet Kotter remains fit perfectly within this pattern. They remind us that early human history was regional, complex, and deeply interconnected. The desert preserved this one life with extraordinary care. But Egypt's sands still conceal many more buried stories, stories that remain unseen, unheard, waiting beneath layers of time. One of those stories draws us forward into the ancient world, into a civilization that learned how to survive and even thrive in one of the harshest environments on Earth. Across the deserts of modern Jordan, Saudi Arabia, and southern Syria lie the traces of a civilization that once controlled the lifelines of the ancient world. Their name was the Nabateans. Today they are best known for a single city, Petra. Carved directly into towering red sandstone cliffs, Petra is filled with monumental tombs and temples. It appears timeless, almost eternal. But Petra was only one piece of a much larger system. Scattered across the Arabian deserts were dozens of towns, forts, and caravan stations. Together, they supported a vast trade network that stretched from southern Arabia to the Mediterranean. Many of these settlements have nearly vanished, their remains half buried in sand or slowly worn away by erosion, yet taken together, they tell a powerful story. The story of a people who mastered some of the most unforgiving landscapes on Earth, and then almost completely disappeared. The Nabateans rose to prominence around the 4th century BC. In their earliest days, they were nomadic traders. They moved goods along caravan routes that linked southern Arabia with the wider ancient world. From Yemen came frankincense and myrrh. From India, spices. From the distant east, silk. These were luxury goods, highly prized, and enormously profitable in the markets of Greece and Rome. To protect this trade and to control it, the Nabateans began to settle. They built an elaborate network of towns and way stations stretching northward into the Levant. These settlements served multiple purposes. They offered water to exhausted caravans, they provided storage for valuable goods, and they ensured security across hundreds of kilometers of open desert. In an environment where water was more valuable than gold, this infrastructure was essential. Petra was their masterpiece. But it did not stand alone. Sites such as Hijra, known today as Madain Salih in Saudi Arabia, formed critical hubs within the network. Further north, towns like Avdat and Shivta anchored trade routes across the Negev desert. Smaller forts at places such as Udra, Bosra, and Sela completed the system. Archaeological evidence shows that these settlements were connected by carefully engineered water systems. Cisterns cut deep into rock, reservoirs positioned to capture rainfall, channels designed to guide flash floods into storage. In a land where rain was rare and unpredictable, this engineering made permanent settlement possible. The Nabateans were experts at blending into their environment. They built with local stone. They carved structures directly into cliff sides. At Hegra, monumental tombs rise from isolated rock outcrops. Their facades decorated with stepped crowns and inscriptions written in the Nabatean script. In many places, later civilizations built directly on top of Nabatean foundations. Byzantine churches and homes stand above earlier structures. These quieter sites, rather than Petra itself, reveal the true scale of Nabatean sophistication. Archaeological surveys over the past century have identified dozens of these towns. Yet many remain only partially excavated. Satellite imagery has added another layer to the story. Ancient caravan roads can now be traced across the desert. They appear as faint lines dotted with small fortresses and watchtowers. These guarded wells and provided safe resting points. The scale of this infrastructure suggests careful planning and strong central control, an unexpected achievement for a people who began as nomads. By the 1st century BC, the Nabatean kingdom was powerful enough to rival Rome's eastern provinces. Control of trade routes brought immense wealth. That wealth funded monumental building projects. Greek and Roman writers described Petra as both opulent and mysterious, a city hidden in the mountains, reachable only through narrow gorges. Despite close contact with the Greco-Roman world, the Nabateans retained their identity. Their inscriptions used a script derived from Aramaic. Their art blended local traditions with Hellenistic and Mesopotamian influences. The disappearance of many Nabatean towns is closely tied to the kingdom's decline. In AD 106, the Roman Emperor Trajan annexed the Nabatean realm. It became the province of Arabia Petraea. At first, Roman rule maintained the caravan routes, but over time, trade patterns shifted. Maritime routes through the Red Sea became faster and safer. Crossing the desert by camel was no longer essential. As commerce moved to sea, overland routes fell quiet. Settlements that depended on caravans began to empty. Climate change played a role as well. Studies of pollen and sediment show that rainfall declined after the 2nd century AD. Agricultural output fell. The intricate water systems that had sustained the Nabateans became harder to maintain without a strong state and steady population. Some towns were reused by later civilizations. Others were abandoned entirely. The silence that followed lasted so long that by the Middle Ages many travelers passed through the ruins without knowing who had built them. Modern archaeology has slowly reconstructed their story. Excavations in the Negev revealed advanced agricultural systems. Terraced fields, runoff channels, vineyards, olive groves. These discoveries changed how scholars viewed the Nabateans, not as wandering traders but as skilled engineers and farmers. Their script, evolving over centuries, would later form the foundation of Arabic writing. Even as their political power faded, elements of Nabatean culture lived on. Petra remains the crown jewel, but it overshadows dozens of other settlements that once supported it. Many of these sites remain buried, visible only as faint outlines on satellite images. As the desert reclaimed them, it erased roads, walls, and inscriptions. A reminder of how quickly prosperity can fade when the systems that support it change. And with that silence settling over the desert, the next mystery draws us deeper into the shadows of early civilization. At the edge of the desert, near the ancient Egyptian capital of Memphis, lies a site that once rivaled one of the most famous temples of the ancient world. It was not built for a pharaoh and not for a sun god. It was built for a deity created to unite two civilizations. His name was Serapis, a god of healing, of wisdom, and of resurrection. A figure designed to bridge Greek and Egyptian belief. The temple dedicated to him at Saqqara became known as the Serapeum. For more than 1,000 years it stood as one of Egypt's most important religious centers. Above-ground shrines and courtyards welcomed pilgrims. Below the surface, something far more extraordinary was hidden. Deep underground, cut directly into bedrock, ran vast galleries. Long corridors, side chambers, and immense stone vaults. These passages were built to house the sacred burials of the Apis bulls. In ancient Egypt, the Apis bull was not merely an animal, it was believed to be the living embodiment of divine power. When an Apis bull died, its death was treated as a sacred event. The body was mummified, rituals were performed, and the remains were sealed inside enormous granite sarcophagi. Each coffin weighed more than 60 tons, yet they were transported through narrow underground corridors with astonishing precision. Even today, standing before these chambers, the scale is difficult to comprehend. The origins of the Serapeum reach far back into Egypt's past. The site began during the reign of Pharaoh Ramesses II in the 13th century BC. At that time, it served solely as the burial place of the Apis bulls. Centuries later, everything changed. After the conquest of Egypt by Alexander the Great, Greek rule reshaped the religious landscape. Egyptian traditions did not disappear. Instead, they merged with Hellenistic ideas. The Apis bull was reinterpreted as part of a new god, Serapis, a deity who embodied both Greek philosophy and Egyptian ritual. In Alexandria, a grand temple to Serapis became one of the city's great landmarks. It was famed for its library, its scholars, and its philosophical schools. The Serapeum at Saqqara, older and more secluded, remained its spiritual twin. Pilgrims continued to arrive. They brought offerings. They prayed for healing. They left inscriptions. Greek letters appeared beside hieroglyphs. Above the ancient burial galleries, new chapels and shrines were constructed. The complex became a living archive of belief, thousands of years of tradition, coexisting within a single sacred space. Then, sometime during late antiquity, that continuity ended. Excavations carried out in the 19th and 20th centuries revealed a startling discovery. Across parts of the upper complex, archaeologists found thick layers of ash and charcoal. Roofing beams, bronze objects had melted. Stone walls were scorched. Statues were cracked and blackened by intense heat. Wooden coffins had been reduced. There was no doubt. A fire had torn through the sanctuary. What remained unclear was when it happened and why. For years, the most common explanation linked the destruction to religious violence in the 4th century AD. By that time, Christianity had become the dominant faith of the Roman Empire. Pagan temples were increasingly targeted. In AD 391, the Serapeum of Alexandria was destroyed during violent riots, an event often seen as the symbolic end of classical religion in Egypt. It seemed logical to assume Saqqara's Serapeum had met the same fate. But the evidence tells a more complicated story. Coins and pottery recovered from the burned layers suggest an earlier date, closer to the mid-3rd century AD, a time when Egypt was already in turmoil. The Roman Empire was struggling with economic collapse. Civil wars erupted repeatedly. Rival emperors fought for control. Armies moved through the province. Some scholars believe the fire may have been accidental, sparked by oil lamps or incense burners used in rituals. Others argue it may have occurred during one of the many conflicts that swept across Egypt during this unstable period. Whatever ignited the flames, the outcome was decisive. ritual activity ended abruptly. The upper temple was never fully rebuilt. The underground galleries were sealed. Priests may have attempted to save what they could. Caches of small bronze statues, lamps, and inscribed plaques were found hidden in corners, perhaps placed there in haste, perhaps intended to be recovered later, but no one returned. In the centuries that followed, the site fell silent. Sand slowly covered the ruined structures. The blackened stones were preserved in place. By the time Christianity spread through Egypt, the Serapeum of Saqqara was already fading into legend. When the French archaeologist Auguste Mariette rediscovered the site in 1850, he descended into the underground galleries. There the massive sarcophagi still stood, untouched. But above them, he found only destruction, collapsed ceilings, ash, and burnt offerings frozen in time. The discovery astonished the world. The Apis tombs demonstrated that Egyptian engineering extended far beyond the pyramids. But the scorched remains above raised a different question. Had this been an act of religious erasure, or simply another casualty of a world falling apart? The lack of inscriptions after the 3rd century AD suggests the cult never recovered. If rebuilding occurred, it was limited. By the time new faiths took hold, the Serapeum had already become a relic of a forgotten age. As the ashes of Saqqara cooled, Egypt's ancient religions receded into memory, replaced by new gods and new empires. But far from Egypt, deep in the jungles of Central America, another city was facing its own quiet end. Far from the deserts of the Middle East, deep in northern Guatemala, near the western shores of Lake Petanitza, lies a site that remained unnoticed for centuries. At first glance it appears unremarkable. Low stone mounds, scattered earthworks, quiet farmland. But beneath this landscape rests the remains of one of the most unusual Maya cities ever discovered. Its name is Nixtun Cheech. For generations the Maya were known for cities that grew organically. Temples and palaces added over time, structures shaped by rulers, rituals, and centuries of change. Nixtunch was different. When archaeologists began mapping the site in the early 2000s, what they found was unexpected. The city stretched for more than a kilometer. Its main avenue ran perfectly straight, aligned from east to west. Temples, plazas, and causeways were laid out with geometric precision. This kind of rigid planning was almost unheard of in Maya architecture. Most Maya cities evolved gradually. Nixtun Cheech appears to have been built according to a single vision, a master plan. Excavations revealed that the city dates to the Middle Preclassic period, between 800 and 500 BC, centuries before the rise of famous Maya capitals like Tikal or Palenque. This makes Nixtun Cheech one of the earliest large-scale urban centers in the Maya world. Its existence challenged long-held assumptions. For years, scholars believed early Maya settlements were small and decentralized. Nixtun Cheech proved otherwise. The precision of its layout suggests strong leadership, perhaps the earliest true kings of the lowlands. The city's main avenue was paved with stone. It connected ceremonial complexes at either end. Its alignment with the rising sun suggests cosmological meaning. Walking this road may have been a ritual act, a physical journey mirroring the path of the sun across the sky. As excavations expanded, archaeologists uncovered monumental architecture. Pyramids rising more than 30 feet, courtyards large enough to host gatherings, altars carefully positioned within plazas. Artifacts recovered from the site tell a story of influence and wealth. Obsidian blades, jade ornaments, ceramics. Trade connections reached from the Guatemalan highlands to the Caribbean coast. Nixtun Cheech was not a minor settlement. It was a political and religious center. Yet despite its ambition, the city did not endure. Sometime around 400 BC, construction stopped abruptly. Population levels dropped, buildings were abandoned. Over the following centuries, the jungle reclaimed the streets and plazas. Later groups occasionally resettled the area. But the original grid city was never revived. The reasons for its decline remain debated. Environmental stress likely played a role. Studies of nearby lake sediments reveal cycles of drought and deforestation. Farming thin tropical soils may have pushed the land beyond its limits. As forests were cleared, erosion increased. Crop yields declined. For a city dependent on centralized planning and rigid order, environmental disruption could be devastating. There are also signs of social tension. Burned layers in some structures suggest episodes of destruction. The deliberate defacing of monuments hints at rebellion or the loss of legitimacy. Nixton Cheech reflects a pattern that would repeat throughout Maya history. Cities built on strict control often flourished briefly, but struggled to adapt when conditions changed. The Great Maya collapse around AD 800 followed a similar trajectory. Nixton Cheech shows that this cycle began much earlier than once believed. Modern technology has brought the city back into focus. LiDAR scanning has revealed the full extent of its planned layout. What once appeared as isolated mounds now forms a connected network of plazas and buildings, a reminder that early Maya society was far more organized than previously thought. And yet, for all its precision, Nixton Cheech was abandoned. Its straight avenues fell silent. Its vision of order could not withstand a changing world. As the jungle closed in around this early city, another mystery was being carved into stone half a world away. In the dry interior of northeastern Brazil, near the town of Ing in the state of Paraíba, there stands a rock face unlike any other in South America. Locals call it the Inga stone. For centuries its surface has been covered with strange carvings, hundreds of symbols, spirals, circles, animals, geometric forms. No one knows who carved them. No one knows exactly when, and no one knows what they mean. The stone stretches more than 40 meters in length, nearly 3 meters high. Its surface is densely packed with engravings, some shallow, others deeply carved. The first written accounts of the Inga stone date to the 19th century. Explorers and missionaries reported rumors of a rock covered in letters. When scholars arrived, they found not an alphabet, but a complex array of symbols. Archaeologists estimate the carvings are between 1 and 2,000 years old, likely created by pre-Columbian peoples who lived in the region long before European contact. Because no organic material is embedded in the stone, radiocarbon dating is not possible. Instead, researchers rely on comparison. Nearby archaeological sites, rock shelters, petroglyph fields with similar motifs. The landscape itself offers clues. Before colonization, the region was inhabited by semi-nomadic groups. They hunted, they fished, they farmed along seasonal rivers. Rock art sites are often found near water sources or in locations with clear views of the sky. The Inga stone fits this pattern precisely. It sits beside a riverbed that floods, turning the area into a dramatic natural stage. The engravings are arranged in panels. The largest, known as the Wall of Ing, contains more than 400 figures. Some carvings resemble fish, snakes, and birds. Others appear human-like. Many are abstract. Some researchers have noted similarities to constellations visible in the southern sky, including Orion and the Pleiades. This has led to theories that the stone served as an astronomical marker. Others interpret the carvings as symbols of fertility, of rain, of water cycles, of agricultural rhythms. One of the most discussed features is a long horizontal groove running nearly the entire length of the stone, flanked by circular depressions and cross-like figures. Some believe it represents a river. Others suggest it may have been used to track the sun's movement through the year. Without written records, every interpretation remained speculative. Over time, more extreme theories emerged, claims of lost civilizations or extraterrestrial contact. These ideas capture attention, but lack archaeological support. The scientific consensus remains cautious. The carvings were made by indigenous peoples using stone tools. Part of a long tradition of South American rock art, Brazil is home to thousands of similar sites. Few, however, match the Inga stone in scale and density. Close examination shows the engravings were created by pecking and polishing the hard granite surface. Some lines are smooth and deliberate. Others appear added later. This layering suggests the stone was carved over generations, each group adding its own symbols to those already present. If so, the Inga stone represents centuries of ritual activity, knowledge recorded not in words but in form and symbol. Standing before the stone, the effect is overwhelming. The carvings seem to flow like a river across the rock. Recognizable shapes merge with abstraction. It is easy to see why early visitors believed they were looking at writing. There is rhythm, there is structure. Yet the language, if it ever existed, has been lost. What remains is a monument to expression without explanation, a message without a key. And as the Inga stone keeps its secrets, another mystery lies hidden beneath the waters of a distant lake. In eastern Turkey, high on the Anatolian plateau, lies a lake unlike any other. Lake Van. Its waters are vast, deep blue, almost metallic in color. It is the largest lake in Turkey, too salty to drink, too alkaline to support most life. Along its shores stand castles, monasteries, and ruins from kingdoms long forgotten. But in 2017, something unexpected was discovered beneath its surface. A massive stone fortress. The discovery began with a team of underwater archaeologists and photographers. They were documenting unusual underwater formations when they noticed straight lines of cut stone. Lines far too regular to be natural. As divers explored further, those lines became walls stretching across the lakebed. Over multiple dives, the team mapped what appeared to be a fortified structure, built on land that was once dry, now submerged beneath several meters of water. The fortress lies near the northern shore of Lake Van, close to the modern city of Van. Its scale is extraordinary, nearly 4 kilometers of walls, some sections still rising 10 meters high. The structure encloses an area larger than a square kilometer. The stones are basalt, dark volcanic rock, quarried locally. The construction style matches others found throughout the region, dating back to the Iron Age, nearly 3,000 years ago. This points to a powerful kingdom, the kingdom of Urartu. Urartu rose in the 9th century BC, arrival to Assyria. Its kings controlled large parts of eastern Anatolia, Armenia, and northwestern Iran. They built their capitals around Lake Van, erecting massive fortresses on mountain slopes, carving inscriptions in cuneiform, creating irrigation canals that still feed fields today. Urartian architecture favored long, straight defensive walls, built from tightly fitted stone. The submerged fortress fits this pattern perfectly. During the Urartian period, Lake Van's water level was much lower than it is today. Geological studies show that over the past 3 millennia, the lake has risen and fallen dramatically, driven by climate shifts, volcanic activity, and tectonic movement. The fortress likely stood along the ancient shoreline, guarding trade routes, protecting fertile plains. At some point after the fall of Urartu in the 6th century BC, water levels began to rise. Slowly at first, then steadily, the lake advanced inland, swallowing settlements, roads, and fortifications. Divers described swimming along the upper portions of the walls, basalt blocks still tightly fitted together, their edges remarkably sharp, preserved by the lake's alkaline water. In some areas, collapsed towers form stone ramps. Elsewhere, corners and gateways remain clearly visible. Photogrammetry and sonar mapping have revealed an orderly layout, walls, angles, possible gate structures, confirming that this was a planned fortress, not a random ruin. Nearby archaeologists have long known of Toprakal, the main Iranian fortress and royal seat of King Ruzarai. Inscriptions found there describe temple dedications and military campaigns. The underwater fortress may have been part of this same defensive network, a lakeside outpost protecting the northern approach to the capital. Artifacts recovered from the lakebed support this dating. Ceramic fragments, simple red and grey wares, bronze objects, possibly arrowheads or tools. Nothing suggests later occupation, strengthening the idea that the site was abandoned as the water rose. Lake Van itself played a role in preservation. It sits in a closed volcanic basin. All rivers flow in, none flow out. Over time, minerals accumulated, creating water that preserves stone and metal in unusual ways. Plant growth is limited, meaning the fortress remains visible, not buried beneath vegetation. Ground-penetrating sonar and aerial surveys have identified additional ruins along the shoreline. Possible docks, warehouses, harbor structures, suggesting the settlement was once connected to lake-based trade. Boats may have carried obsidian, copper, and grain across the water, long before the Persians or Romans arrived. What remains uncertain is how quickly the fortress was lost. Sediment layers show alternating deposits of volcanic ash and lake sediment. This suggests sudden environmental events, possibly volcanic eruptions, or rapid shifts in water level. If so, entire communities may have been forced to relocate quickly, contributing to Urartu's final decline. For centuries, the fortress remained hidden, a drowned monument mistaken for geology, until modern divers revealed a kingdom preserved underwater. But while Lake Van conceals its past, beneath the surface another ancient story lies exposed to wind and sky far to the north, on the islands of Scotland. Across the Orkney Islands off the northern coast of Scotland, the land itself is a monument to prehistory. Rolling grass mounds, standing stones, chambered tombs, many older than the pyramids, older than Stonehenge. These islands preserve the remains of a Neolithic society that flourished over 5,000 years ago, a people who left no written records, yet built monuments of astonishing precision. Among the most remarkable are the tombs of Orkney, stone structures designed not only for the dead but for ritual, astronomy and memory. One of the greatest is Maeshowe, constructed around 2700 BC. From the outside, it appears simple, a grassy mound, but beneath it lies an architectural masterpiece. A long stone passageway leads inward, carefully aligned. At the end, a central chamber built from massive sandstone blocks, each slab cut and fitted with extraordinary accuracy, so precise that even after millennia, the joints remain tight. Once a year during the winter solstice, the setting sun sends a beam of light directly through the entrance. It travels the entire length of the passage, illuminating the back wall of the chamber. This alignment was deliberate. It reveals a deep understanding of solar cycles. Maeshowe was not built in isolation. It formed part of a wider ceremonial landscape. Nearby stand the Ring of Brodgar, the stones of Stennis, the settlement of Barnhouse, all aligned across a narrow land bridge between two locks. Together they suggest a carefully planned, sacred geography. Across Orkney, dozens of tombs share a common design: central chambers, side cells, corbelled roofs, built by stacking stone slabs inward until they meet at the top. Inside, archaeologists have found human remains, often disarticulated, rearranged, alongside pottery, stone tools, and animal bones. These were not simple graves. They were spaces revisited repeatedly. Bodies may have been placed inside to decay, later returned to for ceremonies honoring the ancestors. At some sites, Dog skulls were placed beside human bones, possibly symbols of protection or loyalty. The labor required to build these tombs was immense. Stone slabs, weighing several tons, were quarried and transported without metal tools, without wheels, using only stone hammers, antler picks, and collective effort. Such construction suggests strong social organization. Leadership, ritual specialists, shared belief. The tombs also reveal a complex worldview. Entrances often face specific directions, toward the solstice sun, toward water, toward distant hills. The journey of the sun may have mirrored the cycle of life and death. In winter, when light returned to Meisho's chamber, it may have symbolized rebirth. Stone carvings add another layer: spirals, cup marks, cross-hatched patterns. Symbols found across Neolithic Britain and Ireland. Their meaning remains unknown, but their repetition suggests shared traditions across vast distances. Despite their sophistication, Orkney's Neolithic culture declined. Around 2300 BC, construction stopped. Great monuments were abandoned. Why remains uncertain. Climate change, resource depletion, social shifts. No single answer explains it. Centuries later, new arrivals came: the Vikings. They broke into Meisho in the 12th century, carving runic inscriptions into its walls. Even then, the tombs inspired awe, built by people whose names and purposes had already been forgotten. Today, the tombs still stand, aligned with a winter sun that rises and sets exactly as it did 5,000 years ago. Stone proof of a world, both understandable and unreachable. And as these islands hold the memory of the dead, another mystery waits on the far side of the world, hidden among the forests of New Zealand. In the central North Island of New Zealand, near the southern edge of Lake Top, there is a formation of massive stone blocks that has stirred debate for decades. It lies quietly among dense forest, weathered, partially buried, almost unnoticed. This structure is known as the Kamanawa Wall. At first glance, it appears unmistakable: large rectangular blocks stacked in horizontal layers, clean joints, sharp angles. To some observers, it looks like masonry, the remains of an ancient structure, perhaps built by a forgotten people long before the Maori arrived. To others, it is something very different, a natural geological formation. The question has never been fully resolved. The wall came to wider attention in the 1990s when photographs circulated showing stone blocks that appeared deliberately cut and carefully fitted. The formation stands several meters wide and over 2 meters high before disappearing beneath soil and vegetation. Speculation followed quickly. Some claimed it was evidence of a pre-Maori civilization. Others linked it to lost continents and ancient migrations across the Pacific. Geologists and archaeologists were drawn to the site. What they found was complex. The stone is ignimbrite, a volcanic rock formed from massive pyroclastic flows, superheated ash and debris that settled and solidified over time. This type of rock is common in the Torp volcanic zone, one of the most geologically active regions on Earth. As ignimbrite cools, it contracts. Cracks form along planes of weakness. Over thousands of years, erosion exposes these fractures. In some cases, they resemble stone blocks. Similar formations exist elsewhere. The Giant's Causeway in Ireland, Devil's Postpile in California. But the Kamanawa Wall has unusual features. The joints are horizontal, not vertical. The blocks appear almost too regular. Some surfaces look flattened. Some seams run uninterrupted across multiple blocks. These details have kept the debate alive. Those who argue for a man-made origin point to the precision, the apparent uniformity, the suggestion that the wall continues beneath the ground, possibly part of a larger buried structure. Others note that no tools, no pottery, no settlements have ever been found nearby. If a civilization built this wall, it left no other trace. Maori oral history records arrival around 800 years ago. There is no tradition of stone construction on this scale. Government-commissioned studies concluded the wall is natural, part of a volcanic formation more than 300,000 years old. Yet the site was never fully excavated. Enough uncertainty remains to keep speculation alive. The Kaimanawa Wall stands as a reminder that geology can mimic intention, and that human perception often fills the gaps left by incomplete evidence. As this silent wall continues to provoke debate, another city far older, far more certain, tells a story of cultural fusion and sudden destruction. In the far northeast of Afghanistan, where the Oxus River meets the Kokcha, lie the ruins of a city that once stood at the crossroads of civilizations. Stone columns, broken theaters, fragmented inscriptions. At first glance they look Greek. This was qadeem, a city founded in the wake of Alexander the Great. After his death, his generals divided the empire. In the east, Greek rulers established the Greco-Bactrian kingdom. qadeem was one of its greatest cities. Founded in the early 3rd century BC, it lay thousands of kilometers from Greece. Yet its design was unmistakably Hellenistic. The city covered more than 100 hectares. Excavations revealed paved streets, colonnaded courtyards, a palace complex, a theater, a gymnasium. Massive fortified walls rose above the river. Greek inscriptions were carved into stone. One bore maxims from the Temple of Delphi, "Know the self." That such words appeared here, at the edge of the known world, reveals how far Greek culture traveled. The gymnasium was among the largest ever found outside Greece. Coins depicted Greek gods. Temples followed classical layouts. Yet qadeem was not simply a transplanted city. Persian and Central Asian influences appeared everywhere. Mud brick fortifications, local pottery styles, architectural features adapted to the climate. This was not domination, it was fusion. Greek and Eastern traditions coexisted, merged, created something new. The city's prosperity rested on its location. The Oxus Valley was a vital trade corridor. Goods moved between India, Persia, and the Mediterranean long before the Silk Road was formalized. qadeem controlled river crossings, collected wealth, stored grain, metals, and luxury items. For nearly 2 centuries it thrived. Then around 145 BC everything ended. Excavations uncovered a layer of destruction, collapsed walls, burned buildings, arrowheads embedded in stone, skeletons lying in the streets. The city had been violently destroyed. Historical sources point to invading nomadic groups moving west from Central Asia. The Greco-Bactrian kingdom collapsed under pressure. qadeem, positioned directly in the invasion path, was overwhelmed. After its destruction, the city was never rebuilt. New powers rose, trade routes shifted. The ruins were abandoned, gradually buried by dust and river sediment. For nearly 2,000 years its name was forgotten. When rediscovered in the 20th century, qadeem stunned scholars. It offered a complete picture of cultural exchange, Greek philosophy beside Eastern religion, stone columns beside mud brick, coins inscribed in Greek bearing local symbols. Yet unlike Alexandria or Antioch, qadeem left no descendants, no surviving culture to carry its traditions forward. It vanished completely. A city erased at the meeting point. Across deserts, jungles, mountains, and lakes, the pattern repeats. Civilizations rise. They adapt, they master their environments, and then, sometimes abruptly, they disappear. Trade routes shift, climate changes, belief systems transform. What once sustained prosperity becomes fragile, walls crumble, cities fall silent. What remains are fragments, stone, ash, symbols without meaning. They do not shout, they whisper. And it is only when we listen carefully that the past reveals itself, not as myth, not as legend, but as a reminder that even the greatest societies are temporary, and that time, patient and relentless, eventually claims everything.